Hello everyone, my name is Ari, and I'd like to welcome you to my Restoration Druid Guide for World of Warcraft Legion patch 7.1. This guide is aimed more towards beginner and intermediate players looking to learn a couple new things about their class. In this guide, we're going to be going over the basic spells and abilities that all druids have in their spellbook. We're also going to be looking at different talent setups and what they all do. We're going to be looking at the artifact weapon Gahanir, and we're going to be looking at stat priorities and our mastery Harmony. At the end of the video, we're going to go over a few different scenarios that I think are worth noting in current content, and we're going to go over a couple little tips and tricks that I've found useful over my time playing a druid. Now let's jump right into it, and we're going to start with all those basic spells and abilities that all Restoration Druids should be familiar with. Alright, so we're going to go over the basic spells that a Restoration Druid has in its arsenal, and we're going to start with Rejuvenation, our most basic and used heal. It's a simple hot, it lasts a varying duration depending on what current trait level you are at on your artifact weapon. Mouseover right here. What it's going to do, it's based on your intellect level. It's going to just simply put a heal over time effect on your target, and it is going to tick for a certain amount every 2 seconds-ish, somewhere around there. So what we're going to do is just going to throw it on this little Trent guy so you can see what I'm talking about. Alright, so you see it's a very small immediate heal, and then it will just keep ticking for the duration. Alright, now we're going to look at one of our burst heals, Wild Growth. So what that does, it's a short cast time. Mine's about 1.1 seconds. It will vary depending on what haste you are at, and it is very effective if used correctly. However, the mana cost is very high, so if you're using it at incorrect times or you're spamming it, you are going to start to screw yourself over, and we'll get into that later, but I'll just show you how Wild Growth works real quick. It's a hot, just like Rejuvenation. It's not going to last quite as long, but it's going to heal for a lot more. But the cool thing about it is it's going to hit up to 6 targets. So here, I'm going to cast it again on this Trent so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. You can see how it's ticking, 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 and as the duration continues, the health is going to get smaller and smaller. The way Wild Growth works is when you cast it, the healing is going to be at its highest, and as it gets closer to expiration, the healing is going to decrease. Now we're going to look at Swiftmend, which is most of the time our oh shit heal. It's an instant cast heal. It heals for a very large amount, especially if it crits. And also, it kind of ties into one of our other talents called Soul of the Forest. We will dive into that later on in the video when I discuss that talent. We will also go over how it synergizes with the different spells that you already have. So here, I'm going to just put a Swiftmend right on this Trent. You can see it was just an instant heal for 300,000. Now that one didn't crit, and I don't have any food buffs or anything up. That number will vary drastically depending on the situation and if you're lucky enough to have it crit. So let's go ahead and throw another one on, see if we can get it to crit. Nope, doesn't look like it's going to crit for us. No problem, you get what I'm saying. Now we're going to look at Life Bloom. Life Bloom is just like Rejuvenation. The only difference is it heals much faster. It doesn't heal for quite as much, but it heals a lot faster. But you can only have it active on one target at a time. It makes it a wonderful thing to always have on tanks, especially in raiding content. You don't have to worry about it, you just put it on once and it's going to tick away and do its thing. You do need to keep an eye on when it expires though, because Life Bloom is unique in a way where it has a small bloom heal when it expires. So when you're going to be watching this on tanks, you're going to want to let it expire just for a split second. You're not going to want to refresh the duration, which is a little tip that you can pick up. Alright, so I'm just going to throw Life Bloom on this guy so you can see what I'm talking about. And if you notice too, there's no instant heal. It's not like Rejuvenation. The proc that you just saw come up as well, we will get into that later on in the talent portion of the guide. So now we're going to be looking at probably the most basic heal we have next to Rejuvenation, which is just simply Healing Touch. All this is a slow heal. It's a castable heal, and it heals for a moderately high amount, But the great thing about this heal is it costs virtually no mana. It's very efficient to use, especially if you're not in a part where it's really stressful and your guys are taking a lot of damage. It's good to just to keep a target at a stable level without chewing through a bunch of mana. So I'm just going to cast it again on this Trent real quick. You can see it's quite a slow cast too, so it doesn't make it very efficient for very bursty scenarios. It's more of a stability heal. If you do crit with it, it can give you some pretty high numbers, but RNG is just not on my side today. Okay. So hopefully we'll get a crit here pretty soon. Alright, do you see how that was a huge crit, 300,000? That comes in pretty handy. And if you notice too, I'm going to spam a couple of these. Look at my mana bar. By the time I get the next one to cast off, the mana's already regenerated. I could sit here and do this all day and never go oom. So you see just how efficient this spell actually is. Now we're going to be looking at Regrowth, which is the very quick version of Healing Touch. I'll show you right there. Now the unique thing about Regrowth is it itself puts a hot on the target. Now the hot doesn't do pretty much anything. 4,000 at level 110, people are normally going to be having anywhere between 1.5 to 2.2 million health, unless they're a tank. So you can kind of realize that 4K every couple seconds, even 8K when it crits, really isn't that much. But here's the thing about it. The way our mastery works, which I will get into in a little bit, that little hot is going to actually matter, and that's going to probably increase your healing anywhere from 15 to 20%. And if you don't understand that now, that's okay. We're going to go through it later when I delve into the stats and the mastery-specific trait to Restoration Druids. Now, Regrowth, big difference from Healing Touch is the mana consumption. So if you want to look down at my mana bar, I'm going to start spamming, and you're going to see just how much mana this actually takes. Quite a bit. Now, if I just sat here and spam this, I'm actually more than likely going to go very quickly. So Regrowth, my advice for it would be only use it in oh shit scenarios when you really need to heal someone, they're about to die. Then it's okay to chew through a good chunk of mana, because if you don't, target's going to die, chances are group is going to wipe. The other thing is, it's very good for your mastery, which, as I said earlier, we will get into later. It depends on how many hots you have active on the target at any given time. Also, the Restoration Druid has a passive ability called Living Seed, which is when you cast Regrowth, you see that buff that pops up very quickly and goes away. Because I'm on a training dummy, it's not going to stay on the target, but the way Living Seed works is when you Regrowth, you get a seed on the target, and it works kind of like Prayer of Mending for priests. When the target takes damage again, the seed is consumed and it heals the target for a predetermined amount. Now we're going to be looking at our main mitigation move. More than likely going to always be used for tanks on the off chance that they do not have a personal active at the time. This is called Iron Bark. What Iron Bark does is it gives them a 20% damage reduction baseline, and it will change in strength. Mine is at 24%. All it really does is instant cast, select your target, and then they are going to get a 12-second 20% damage reduction. Very good for preparing for large single hit attacks on tanks, or if you have a DPS that is soaking a mechanic like Flowers on Dragons of Nightmare, you can throw an Iron Bark on there and hopefully stabilize the target, because they do take quite a fair amount of damage when they are in those flowers. The last one I want to go over in our basic spell rotation is Innervate and Cleansing. Cleansing is very simple. It's just removing debuffs on targets, something that you're going to want to stay on top of. A lot of healers forget about this, and this is a very important part. Groups can get screwed over very easily by certain debuffs on bosses. We will go into this much further on in the guide when we are going over certain scenarios and little tips and tricks for different fights in Legion currently. The big one though is Innervate. This is your emergency spell. This is going to save you from a lot of headache later on. You can almost think of it as a free mana pot in a fight. What it does is it allows you to cast all of your healing spells for 10 seconds without using any mana. Now here's the cool part. You can use this on yourself, or you can use this on another healer in your raid. Not only does this allow you to really get that burst healing out there and chew through stuff without having to worry about your mana bar, but you also have to remember that your passive mana regeneration is still happening while this is up, so you're going to regenerate quite a fair bit of mana while this is up. That's why I like to think of it as a second mana pot. However, Innervate is on a 3-minute cooldown, which is why I call it the emergency spell. You cannot use this willy-nilly, you have to plan for it. Certain encounters have certain times when it is best used, and as you go through them, you are going to learn when to use it and when not to use it. That concludes the basic spell portion of the guide. I hope you guys learned a little something right there. Now we're going to move on to the talent section, where I'm going to go over all of the talent tree. I'm going to explain to you which ones to use in certain scenarios, and I'm also going to give you a basic cookie cutter setup for both raiding and for 5-man content. We'll see you over at the talents. Okay, so your first set of 3 talents, all very simple choices. You're going to have Prosperity, Cenarian Ward, and Abundance. 99% of the time, you're going to be using Prosperity. It's very simple. It just gives you 2 charges of Swift Men, and it's going to reduce the cooldown of Swift Men by 3 seconds. Plays very huge part in a talent later on that we're going to go over called Soul of the Forest. Next over, we have Cenarian Ward. Very similar to Living Seed, except on steroids. You're going to put a ward on a friendly target for 30 seconds, and when the ward is consumed, when they take damage, it's going to heal them for a set amount over 8 seconds. The amount healed will always change depending on your level of intellect and what gear you have. The last talent in that tree is called Abundance. This one you're probably never going to use in PVE content, whether it be 5-mans or raiding. What Abundance does is for every active rejuvenation you have out on a target, or multiple targets, it's going to reduce the cast time of Healing Touch by 10%, and it's also going to increase the crit chance of regrowth by 10%. I would think this would probably be a lot better to use in PvP, but I don't really have any experience in it, so I don't feel like I'm the person to offer any advice on that talent. 99% of the time though, we are going to be going with Swift Men. It's a very quick, you can just boop boop 2 Swift Men's in there if you need to. It's just going to be the one that you take. You just gotta trust me on this one. The only time you're going to be taking Cenarian Ward is if you're going to be doing a lot of tank focused healing, lots of high single target damage. Then that talent really will shine. Moving on to the next set, we're going to be looking at Renewal, Displacer Beast, and Wild Charge. Now Renewal is very simple. It's just a instant heal for 30% of your maximum health, only yours. It's not a castable on someone else. And the cool thing, you can use it in any shapeshift form, whether it be cat, bear, travel form, you get the picture. Moving to the middle, we're going to have Displacer Beast, which is my personal preference. What it does, it's kind of like a mage's blink. It teleports you forward up to 20 yards, and it's going to activate cat form and give you a 50% movement increase for 4 seconds. Now it's also important to note, you can shapeshift right out of cat form and still retain the movement increase. The third one in the tier is called Wild Charge. Wild Charge is a little bit more complicated as it varies on what form you are in. When you are in regular troll, I'm a troll form, Tauren form, not even going to mention the Alliance, they're not worth it. When you're in regular form, you're going to fly to a nearby ally's position. When you're in bear form, you're going to charge an enemy and you're going to immobilize them for 4 seconds. When you're in cat form, you're going to leap behind an enemy and you're going to daze them for 3 seconds. When you're in travel form, you're simply going to leap forward 20 yards, guys. When you are in Boomy form, Owlkin form, it's much like a hunter's disengage. You're going to leap backwards. When you are in aquatic form, you are going to have increased swim speed by an additional 150% for 5 seconds. This talent overall is more so a quality of life talent. It's not very useful. As I said earlier, Displacer Beast is probably going to be your best bet, as it's very good for getting out of tight spots. You can bait certain mechanics on bosses, like Nathendra when she does her frontal cone ability. Generally, you're only going to be going with Displacer Beast if you're playing Restoration. Okay, moving on to level 45, the 45 tier. This one's a little bit unique to Druids. It was introduced in Legion, and this is called the Affinity Tree. What it does is it gives you a little bit of the other specs in a talent. So it's going to be the Feral Affinity, the Balance Affinity, and the Guardian Affinity. And as you'd think, it would give you abilities based on those specs. When we're looking at the Feral Affinity, it's going to give you a passive 15% movement increase. You're also going to learn the basic Feral spells like Shred, Rake, Rip, Ferocious Bite, and Swipe. Now we're going to look over at the Balance. When you have Balance, you're going to get a passive increase of 5 yards to your range for all of your abilities. You're also going to be able to use Owlkin form. You're going to be able to use Star Surge and Lunar Strike. And lastly, we have Guardian Affinity. Guardian Affinity's passive is going to be a 6% or 5%. Honestly, it depends on your stats. It's going to be a slight passive damage reduction, and you're also going to get the bear abilities Mangle, Thrash, Iron Fur, and Frenzied Regen. For raiding content, you're probably going to want to stick with Guardian Affinity, because that passive damage reduction really goes a long way. It goes farther than you'd think it would. For 5-man's leveling content, it's really up to you. It's your own personal playstyle. If you want a little bit extra range on your spells, go ahead with the Balance Affinity. If you want to do a little bit more damage when you're not doing healing, take the Feral Affinity. It's really up to personal choice. Into the level 60 talent tree, we're going to be looking at our CC talents. These are Mighty Bash, Mass Entanglement, and Typhoon. Mighty Bash is simply a stun you can use in all shapeshift forms for 5 seconds. It's on a 50-second cooldown. It's very good for CCing ads, and it's also very good for PvP. I would assume, I'm not a PvP player, but I would assume that's most likely the talent you're going to be taking for PvP. Next over, we have Mass Entanglement, which is just like entangling roots. It's going to root a target in place, but the cool thing, just like the name implies, it's going to spread to all the nearby enemies by the first one that you rooted. So you can root large groups of ads and hold them there for about 20 seconds. You do need to remember though that if any damage is caused to the targets after they are rooted, there is a chance that it will break the root and the ads will continue on their way. The last talent in that tree is called Typhoon. Typhoon is also a CC ability, and this one is very cool as in the way it works. It knocks back all enemies in a frontal cone for 15 yards. And on top of that, it will slow them for 6 seconds. It's very important to keep in mind that all of these talents work in all shapeshift forms. And I know shapeshifting can get a little bit confusing with having one action bar that consistently changes. Okay, so now on to tier 75. This is one of the big ones. We're going to be starting with Soul of the Forest. This is probably the one that I will take hand over fist for any 5-man content, and it's really cool in the way it works. What it does is it augments a bunch of your spells every time you use Swiftmend. So, I'm going to use Swiftmend on this little Trent guy, and you're going to notice we get a buff down here called Soul of the Forest. Now what that does is 3 different things. It will either buff your Rejuvenation by 200%, your regrowth by 200%, or your next wild growth by 75%. Now just think about that. That's going to be a lot of burst healing in a very small group of targets. So I'm going to put a regular regrowth on this treant, so you can see it's ticking for 28k. Now we're going to Swiftmend him, and now we're going to put a rejuve on this guy. You can see the difference between the ticks, 28 versus 84,000. That's very, very large. So now for regrowth, it does the same thing. I'm going to target this one, I'm going to use a regrowth. You can see it was 118,000. Now we're going to Swift Mend, so we get the Soul of the Forest buff. We're going to regrowth this guy. Much bigger number, 709,000. Now when you have a target falling very low on health very quickly, you can see how that would be extremely helpful to have to get the target back up to an appropriate level. Now for Wild Growth, it's going to buff it by 75%, not 200. If it was 200%, that would be absolutely ridiculous. But I'm just going to cast a normal Wild Growth so you can see what it does. See, it's ticking for a fairly decent amount. I'm going to wait for that to run out really quickly. Alright, so now I'm going to Swift Mend him again. We have the Soul of the Forest buff. Now I'm going to Wild Growth. Now look at the difference in the numbers. That's huge. That is very, very big. And the very, very cool thing about it, and why Soul of the Forest works so well for 5-man content, is because you're with 5 people. Swift Mend hits a max of 6. So you're going to have that big hot on everybody in your group if they are positioned correctly. Every now and then you are going to have that one person off in bumfuck nowhere, and you're not going to be able to get the hot on them, but 90% of the time it's going to be very, very big. The second talent in this tier is called Incarnation, the Tree of Life. This is a very, very big cooldown. It's a 3-minute cooldown. What it does is it basically turns you into a gigantic tree, and when you're in that tree form, you are going to have 15% increased healing. You're also going to have increased armor by 120%, and you're also going to be immune to polymorph effects. On top of that, it's going to augment your rejuve, your wild growth, your regrowth, and your entangling roots, a little bit like Soul of the Forest does. So when you're in the tree form, your rejuvenations are going to be drastically reduced on mana cost. Your wild growths are going to hit extra targets. Your regrowths are going to be instant cast. Now I'm going to show you what that looks like real quick. So we're going to pop into tree form. It's this gigantic guy. Lasts for 30 seconds. It's on a 3-minute cooldown, just to reiterate. So you need to plan for when you're going to use this. So I'm going to put some regrowths up, and you can see how much they are increased by without the Soul of the Forest buff, obviously. Also, if you notice, regrowths are an instant cast. Now that would be really, really cool if it weren't for the mana cost. But there is a trick to circumvent that. You remember that spell we talked about called Innervate? Reduces, or removes actually, all of the mana costs from your spells for 10 seconds. Now think about this. If you couple Incarnation, Tree of Life, with Innervate, you're going to have a lot of healing. Okay? And sometimes it's best to macro them together, so you pop them at the same time. Other times it's best to go into tree form, wait a little bit, then pop your Innervate, and then you can start going through a bunch of stuff. It's really dependent on the scenario that you're in. The last one in that tier is called Cultivation. Cultivation is what I'm running right now. We are currently on Cenarius Mythic in the Emerald Nightmare. And what Cultivation does is very cool, is when you have a target and it has rejuve on them, if the target is below 60% health and rejuve ticks, it's going to put a second hot on them. This hot's only going to last for 6 seconds, but as long as the target is under 60%, that hot's going to endlessly renew, so you're constantly going to have this fast ticking hot on the target. It's very, very helpful too for very large group healing, where a lot of the group spends most of their time sub 60%. So going on to tier 90, we're going to have Spring Blossoms, Inner Peace, and Germination. And starting off with Spring Blossoms, it's very simple, it's just a passive, and what it's going to do is every time you put a wild mushroom down, or efflorescence, it's going to put a second hot on them. So I'll show you what that looks like. Efflorescence only heals 3 targets, so it's going to work very well on these treants, but you can see they all have a second hot on them. You can notice it right down here, Spring Blossoms. Very useful for fights where you're going to have a lot of people grouped up very often, although in raiding content, generally not something you're going to be going with at the current progression. The next one in the talent tree is the big one. This is called Inner Peace. This is huge. It reduces your tranquility cooldown by an entire minute, So your biggest healing cooldown is only on a 2-minute timer now. Very, very useful, especially on fights like Ursoc, when you're going to have a heal list for who's going to use what cooldown for what charge. Not really anything else to explain about that, it's just a basic cooldown reduction. Last in that tier is called Germination. Germination just augments your rejuvenation yet again, and it's going to allow you to put 2 rejuvenations on a single target. This is going to be your 5-man talent, because it is extremely useful for maintaining a small group of people. When you start going over 5, 6, maybe even 7 people, managing 2 rejuves per target gets a little out of control, but generally for 5-mans this talent is just perfect. Now moving on to the level 100 tier, we're going to have Moment of Clarity, Stonebark, and Flourish. Now Moment of Clarity is very simple. Druids have a passive ability called Omen of Clarity, and when this triggers, by your life bloom ticks, it's going to give you a free regrowth. That's the little green proc you saw pop up on my screen a little while ago. Now what Moment of Clarity does is every time this proc triggers for you, it's instead going to give you 3 free charges instead of 1. I personally don't really like this talent. Regrowth by itself doesn't do much. It's good for having that extra hot for your mastery, and it's good for those emergency situations, but as a general talent, it's not very useful. It may be for leveling, it really depends on how you like to play. Second in this tier is called Stonebark. Stonebark, it augments your mitigation move called Ironbark. We talked about that in the first section of this guide. What it's going to do is reduce your cooldown of Ironbark by 30 seconds, and it's going to increase all of the heal over time effects on that target by 20%. So this just makes Ironbark in Cenarian Ward, all of that stuff, even more helpful for single target healing such as strenuous tank fights, like Ursoc again, very, very hard on the tanks. This talent generally though is not one that I'm going to go for. Aside from very unique situations, it's just not going to be as helpful as the last talent in this tier called Flourish. The Flourish is absolutely wonderful. It's my favorite talent. I use it for everything, and it's really simple. It's also on a very short 1-minute cooldown, and all it does is it extends all of your current hots on any target within 60 yards by 6 seconds. So you can think about this. If you get a rejuve on your entire party of 5, then you use a Soul of the Forest and Wild Growth, so they all have the 75% increased healing. Then you're going to pop Flourish if you need to, if they're taking a ton of damage, and it's going to pretty much leave them on for a ridiculous amount of time, and that gives you a lot of extra time to throw some healing touches in there, or extra regrowths or whatnot. All in all, I'm going to say Flourish is generally the talent you're going to want to take. The other two have nothing on this talent. Okay, so we've gone through all the talents. Now I'm going to give you a basic setup for 5-man content / leveling, and I'm also going to give you a basic setup for raiding. Keep in mind, all of this is subject to change based on the encounter that you are in and the situations that you face. This is just a general set of guidelines for what's going to give you the best results. So for 5-mans, we're going to have Prosperity, Displacer Beast. The affinity tier is all up to you, it depends on how you want to play. Then we're going to have either Mass Entanglement or Typhoon. Then we're going to go with Soul of the Forest. We're going to have Germination and Flourish. Very, very helpful setup right there. For the rating part, we are going to, again, go with Prosperity, Displacer Beast, Guardian Affinity, either Typhoon or Mass Entanglement. Then we're going to go with Soul of the Forest for a couple fights. Most of the time though, you're going to be going with Cultivation. Then we're going to have Inner Peace for the Tranquility Reduction. And then lastly, we're going to have Flourish. That concludes the talent section of the guide. Now we're going to see you over at the artifact weapon. Okay, welcome to the artifact weapon portion of the guide, where we're going to look at the 3 golden traits Resto Druids get. We're also going to be looking at a few different relics to keep your eyes out for, and we're going to go over a basic path to spend your artifact power with. So first we're going to dive into the 3 golden traits. We're going to have Dreamwalker, and what Dreamwalker does is every time you wild growth, you're basically going to have a 50% chance to instantly heal all of your targets with rejuve on them. It's going to be an instant heal for 250% of your spell power, so obviously it's going to vary depending on the stats that everybody has. The second one we're going to look at real quick is called Tranquil Mind. Very, very simple. All it's going to do is a flat 20% buff to Tranquility. But the cool thing about this one is we're also going to be able to use Tranquility while moving now, which is, as a utility, it's extremely helpful for fights such as Dragons of Nightmare. If you happen to get hit with a tail swipe or get knocked out by a flower or whatever it is, and you don't have this, and you say you just pop Tranquility, that's a 2 or 3 minute cooldown gone that you're not going to get any use from. So this one, utility-wise, is very useful. The last one we're going to go over is the power of the Arc Druid. This one is also based off wild growth, and it also works with rejuvenation. So what it does is this one is a 25% chance. Every time you use wild growth, it's going to proc your rejuve or your regrowth. You're going to get a little green kind of half circle on your screen to let you know you have the proc. But what it's going to do is when you get that and you apply rejuve to somebody, you're also going to apply rejuve to 2 other people simultaneously. It works the same way with regrowth. So you can see how that would work pretty well. Okay, now you're probably wondering what's the artifact ability that Gahanir provides us as Resto Druids. And I tell you, it's pretty cool. It comes in very handy in very tricky scenarios where you need to keep on the move but still maintain massive output. And basically what it does is it's going to double the frequency at which all of your heal over time effects will tick on the target. So I will show you what that looks like really quick. Oh yeah, and very fast, it's called Essence of Gahanir. I'm just going to mouse over it very quickly so you can see what I'm talking about. But what I'm going to do is just going to put a rejuvenation on all of these guys. Actually, I believe I'm running germination, so I can put 2 on each one. There we go. So now you see the rate at which they're ticking for. Now we're going to hit our Essence of Gahanir, and now look how much faster they are ticking. It's just like putting your heal over time effects on speed. Just they're going insanely fast. It doesn't last for very long, and a quick little pro tip. Sorry, Warring. A quick little tip too, if you are a troll like I am, you can macro your artifact ability together with your racial called Berserking, which is a haste buff, and it, come on man, I'm doing a video. And it just creates even faster healing for you. So yeah, just really quick, wanted to go over the artifact ability. Alright, so now we're going to give the relics a quick look. We're going to start with Knowledge of the Ancients, which is going to be your best overall trait to enhance. That is simply your mana regeneration. You're also going to want to keep your eye out for Persistence. That's going to increase your duration on rejuvenation, so that also is going to save you some mana in the long game. Other ones that you can keep your eye out for are Infusion of Nature, Essence of Nordrassil, and Natural Mending. The last 3, it's kind of up to you in your own personal playstyle, but as a general rule of thumb, you're going to want to keep your eyes out for the first 2, especially Knowledge of the Ancients. Alright, so real quick, we're going to bounce over to the, it's not the correct path, but it is a general path for someone who's not really sure what to do. So the way it's going to start out, you're obviously going to have the very first one that you unlock. Then you're going to head over to the rejuvenation talent, and you're going to follow an arc all the way over on the top. Get all the top traits, and you're going to head right to Dreamwalker. Because Dreamwalker is extremely helpful in both raiding and for 5-man content. That extra heal is extremely useful for getting out of tight situations. The second one we're going to do is we're going to branch down from our Healing Touch trait. We're going to go over to the Life Bloom trait. up to the Iron Bark, and then we're going to go down to the Tranquil Mind golden trait for the 20% increase and the casting while moving. Lastly, we're going to pop down from our starting point with Rejuvenation. We're going to go down to the Wild Growth, up through the Moonfire, Sunfire, and Rejuve Duration trait, up again, and then we're going to go right down to the last golden trait we get, which is called Power of the Arc Druid, which we went over just a couple moments ago, which is the proc for a triple rejuve or regrowth. So the pathing is pretty simple. You can play with this yourself. This isn't saying that this is what you have to do. I personally didn't go even close to this, but for someone who doesn't know what they're doing like I didn't have any clue, I would have gone back and done something a little bit more similar to this. For me personally, I went Dreamwalker, then I went Power of the Arc Druid, and I'm actually still working on getting the Tranquil Mind one. I think I'm 2 or 3 traits away, so we'll see. It's starting to cost about 140,000 artifact power for me to get a new trait, and I just don't like grinding, so it's not something I'm going to be doing. But there's the artifact weapon and the relics for you guys. It was a really quick overview. If you have any questions, make sure to put them down below. I will reply to everyone as long as it's not a complete asinine question. And yeah, that concludes the Gahanir section. Now we're going to move over to stat priority, mastery, and we're going to look at a couple consumables that help us during encounters. So we'll see you guys over there. Alright, so now we're going to look at the stats for Resto Druid. We're also going to talk about 2 of them in particular that switch out with each other depending on if you are in raiding content or 5-mans. So obviously our top stat's going to be Intellect. This gives us spell power, which buffs the strength of all of our heals. This is what you're going to be looking for on every single piece of gear you grab. I have my character paint open right here so you can kind of look through what I have. You can see here all the percentages for everything that I do have. So yeah, Intellect is going to be your main one. That should be on every piece you pick up. Second for general is Haste. Okay, Haste is going to be your secondary best stat to pick up. That's going to increase the rate at which all of your heal over time effects tick on a target. Pretty self-explanatory. Third, this is where we're going to run into the 2 stats that are going to interchange depending on what content you are doing. If you are in 5-mans or Mythic Plus, you are going to want Mastery. Mastery is very important for those. If you are in a raiding scenario, you're going to want Critical Strike. So to explain that a little bit, Mastery works, it's been changed since Warlords of Draenor. In Warlords of Draenor, it was a flat... oh, hello, my flower just grew. Oh, and I got a pet. Look at that. Oh, I already got one. Anyway, so Mastery in Draenor worked where it was just a flat healing increase every time you used a castable heal like Regrowth or Healing Touch, and you could just endlessly renew it throughout the fight. It's been changed up for Legion, so you still get the percentage heal increase, but the way it works is... say, let's see, my mastery is at 16%. So I'm going to put a rejuve on myself, and that rejuve would be increased by 16%. Let's say I then put a life bloom on me. I am now going to be getting double that, and it will stack for every hot you put on your target up to 3 hots. Which, if you can remember back to the beginning of the guide when I was discussing regrowth, the hot that regrowth gives actually works very well with your mastery. So if you're not running germination, if say you're in a raiding content, you can have regrowth, rejuve, and life bloom on a tank, and you're going to be getting the maximum mastery proc for you. Now, for raiding, you're going to want to go more towards critical strike. It's just a general increase in healing, really high ticks. There's not a ton to explain there. And then last on the list, of course, is going to be versatility. Versatility is dog shit, and I don't really care. I also apologize if you hear my cat in the background. He's upset because he didn't get more food for dinner. He's a fat cat. Okay, so for consumables, gemming, and enchanting on a Resto Druid, there is some pretty basic stuff to keep an eye out for. For your neck enchant, you're going to want Mark of the Trained Soldier. That's going to be a 300 mastery enchantment. For the cloak, you're going to want either Binding of Intellect, which is the best, or Word of Intellect, which is a little bit cheaper. And then for the rings, you're going to want Binding of Haste, or yet again, Word of Haste, because it is a little bit cheaper. All of this stuff right now is pretty high on price on the auction house for my server anyway, so it would probably be beneficial if you had a friend or a guildie that was an enchanter, and then they can take care of it for you, and hopefully you can get that sweet guildie discount. As far as gemming goes, you're going to want to use a Saber's Eye of Intellect in at least one slot. I believe you can only equip one, but that is a 200 Intellect gem. So if you have multiple slots, you're going to want a Saber's Eye in one of them for sure. All of the other sockets, you're going to want to put a Quick Dawn Light in it, which is a 150 haste gem. As far as consumables go for raiding, the flask that you're going to want to use is the Flask of Whispered Pact. That's going to increase your intellect by 1300 for an hour, 2 hours if you are an alchemist. As far as potions go, you're going to want to look at either the Potion of Deadly Grace or the new one that they just introduced. I can't remember what it's called, but those are both damage pots. You can use them for pre-potting before pulls to squeak out a little bit of extra damage on a boss that you're really close to phasing on, or you're struggling with progression. For mana pots, you're going to want to have Ley Torrent potions. They are a little bit more expensive and harder to come by, but they do generate quite a bit of mana over the ancient mana potions that you can use. The only other issue with them is you do have to channel. It is a channeled potion, so you are going to be sitting there not doing anything for a little bit of your time. It's about 10 seconds. And as I said, if that's not something that you can afford or want to use, you can use ancient mana potions. They don't give you quite as much back, but they are still extremely useful. So if you can couple either a Ley Torrent and ancient mana, couple them with the use of Innervate for even more mana back, and then you can also use, there is a trinket that drops off Elreth Renferal, the Spiderbird boss, that also gives you a passive mana regen. As far as food goes, there's only one choice, and that's going to be the haste food. If you're looking for the top of the line food, it's going to be the Ajari salad. That's going to give you 375 haste for an hour. If you are looking for a little bit of a cheaper option, you have the Suramar Surf and Turf, which is only 300 haste for an hour. Both of them do reset on dying, so you will have to have quite a bit of these if you are on a progression fight. But as far as gems, enchants, consumables, and stuff, that's what we have right now. It's pretty simple. All of this you can find online. You can also find it all on the auction house. It's pretty easy to come by, but yeah, that's what you're going to want to be looking for. Now we're going to cap it off by going through a couple scenarios that I think would be beneficial for you guys to see on how I react to certain things that are coming, certain large spikes in damage that I know are coming up, whether it be single target or multi-target. And we're also going to check out just a couple quick little tips I have, maybe a couple little macros, and just general things that are going to make you have an easier time playing Restoration Druid. So let's head on over to that. Alright, so I just wanted to cover really quickly how to set up certain things when you are in a encounter and you're healing. The main one I wanted to go over was your, I'd probably call it your burst healing, your AoE, just the ability that Restoration Druids have to take I'd say a fairly large group of players, anywhere from 6 to maybe 10, maybe you can even stretch that up to 15 with the right setup, but the ability to take that group of people and just pour the healing into them. And it takes a little bit of knowledge of the spells that you have and how they work together, and it also takes a little bit of making sure that they go out in the correct order. And I'm just going to show you a really simple one that I use a lot. Right in my talents here, you're going to see I'm running Soul of the Forest and Germination. As a personal preference of my own, I like to do 5-man healing. I am in a progression rating guild, but my favorite is doing 5-man healing. You could be different. You could be a raid healer, whatever it may be, but this is what I like to do, and I'm going to show you the way I like to heal very, very large amounts very quickly. And I think one of the biggest and best examples for that would be when you are running Mythic Halls of Valor, and I believe her name is Herja. It's the second boss if you go to the left, the one that does the move called Sanctify, which is what I want to talk about. And what Sanctify does, she starts casting it, and it sends out these little swirling orbs in all directions, and they originate from her. And they do a pretty fair amount of damage to a player if it is hit by one, but if the encounter is on Mythic difficulty, if one person gets hit by it, everybody takes the amount of damage for it. So groups can get out of hand very, very quickly in that particular part. And I have, in all the runs I've done on it, nobody ever misses all of them. People always hit some, and the group takes a large chunk of damage. And the way that you're going to want to set up for that is, number one, the most important thing, knowing that it is coming up. The biggest thing I can stress is know the fights ahead of time, so you aren't reacting to things that are already happening. You need to know what's coming up so you know the best way to protect your group. Alright, so for the burst healing, it's pretty simple. Let's just pretend this little guy on the left is our tank, so we're already going to have Life Bloom up on him. So we know Sanctify is coming. We're going to assume that people are not going to move out of the orbs. So what I'm doing right here is I have 2 rejuvenations on each of these guys. I'm going to Swift Mend the tank. I'm going to pop a Wild Growth so everybody has it. Then I'm going to hit Flourish, which is going to extend all the duration. Then I'm going to hit my Essence of Gahanir. Now look at this. Everywhere. That is a ton and ton of healing. And I will go over it really slowly again for you because it's a little bit quickly. Unfortunately, my shit's on cooldown, but I'll just talk you through it. So, you know a bunch of stuff is incoming. You know the group is going to take a big amount of damage. You're going to want to make sure you have a rejuvenation on everybody. So I'm going to put a rejuve on everybody. Now, if you have Germination, you can put another rejuve on everybody, which is what I'm running right now. So now there's 2 rejuves on each target. Now we're going to use our Soul of the Forest on our Swiftmen, which is going to give us the buff. So we're going to get that 75% increased Wild Growth, which is going to incredibly heal all of your targets. Now what you're going to do is your level 100 talent called Flourish, and this is only if the damage that is incoming is lasting a decent amount of time. So Flourish is going to extend all of that, so you have all of those hots rolling for a much longer period of time. Now if it's in unimaginable amount of damage and people are down in the 20% health range, that's when you're going to use your Essence of Gahanir, your artifact ability, which we talked about a little bit ago in the guide. That's going to double the rate in which all of your hots are ticking on the target. So let's see, alright, my cooldowns are not up. So Essence of Gahanir is not up, but we're going to go through it again. So that's our tank. We have Life Bloom on him. We know the damage is coming in, so we're going to get a rejuve on everybody in our party. We're going to throw a double rejuve on them if we have time, which is the important thing. We're going to Swift Mend, so we get the augmented Wild Growth. Pop the Wild Growth on there. Then we're going to hit Flourish, and those things are just going to tick and tick and tick. And down here you can see how long Wild Growth is actually lasting. It's quite a long time. That's the best way I have found to burst heal groups of people. It will take a little bit of practice. You will have to play around with it, and it's not something that you're going to get right away, but it is something that is extremely useful and great to really work on so you know how to save the group if something like that happens. Okay, so the other one I wanted to touch on briefly was your single target healing. Druids are very, very good at blanket healing. And they are very good, I would say very good as well at single target healing. And a lot of it's really cool because it depends on the talents that you're taking. So let's say Cenarian Ward and whatnot, you can be a very single or double target focused healer. I don't spend a lot of time doing that because we have a Holy Paladin in our raid, which he takes care of all the tank heals. So all the time I'm just kind of blanket healing the raid. But for single target, you're going to have Cenarian Ward. I don't know why I'm in combat, but Cenarian Ward. And basically you're going to maintain your double rejuve on the target. You're also going to maintain your regrowth hot and your life bloom. You're going to use Cenarian Ward if it comes up, but here's the important thing. You want to use healing touches unless the target is becoming unstable and you need to use your regrowths. Regrowths should not be used except for if you have a free cast or you are in a lot of trouble. The other important thing, and earlier I said the most important thing is to know fights and know what's going to happen. That is true. Another thing, and this is very specific to Restoration Druids, is simply let the hot do the work. Let it do what it's supposed to do. If I have a rejuvenation on this target, you can see it's an 18-second duration. Say you're under stress, you're in a really tight raid, and you're trying to heal everybody as much as you can, and you see, oh, that's got 5 seconds left. That's still 5 seconds of healing that rejuvenation still has to do. So if you go and overwrite that with a new one, yes, you are going to reset the duration, but you're going to be completely wasting 5 seconds of healing that you're not going to get back. You have to let the hots do the work that they're designed to do. And that's a kind of a hard thing to get used to as a Restoration Druid, is patience. The spells are designed to do their full amount of healing over a set duration, and you're not doing them any help if you reset them before they're completely done. You're wasting their full potential. Granted, there are certain scenarios when it is best to reset them a little bit earlier than normal, say if you need to get a lot of people covered. An example would be Il'gynoth. When you are killing the slimes on Mythic difficulty, they put a raid-wide ticking dot on the group, and it's really good to have everybody rejuved for that point. And if you have a couple that are about to fall off, it's totally fine to redo them. Even if they do have like 6-7 seconds still left up on them. But generally speaking, try not to reapply your hots until they are done. Just let them do the work that they're supposed to do. Okay, now just a couple quick tips and tricks for Resto Druids. These are the ones that I've been using and they've been helping me out a bunch. I'm going to go over a couple little cool things that Druids can do that are kind of unique to them. And I'm also going to show you a couple macros that I have been using to better myself in a raiding environment. So first, the couple little unique things to Druids, which is really cool. When you shapeshift, you remove any root effect on you. So if I'm running around, I'm healing these guys, and let's say I'm on Dragons of Nightmare, and the big root spell comes out where it puts a large circle on the ground, it roots you in place, and a couple seconds later you take a massive amount of damage unless you get out of the root. Now most people don't have a root breaker, and I'm going to throw up a clip of my guild's kill on Dragons of Nightmare so you can see what I'm talking about. But most people don't have a root breaker. So I know Druids do, Hunters do, I know there's a couple others, but I can't think of them. But generally, that's something that the player will call out for, and then one of our healers or myself will dispel them and allow them to get out of the root. But the cool thing about Druids is you can just shapeshift to get out of it. So let's say I'm running around and I'm healing, and you get rooted, pop into cat form. The root's gone, and you're going to see that in the clip that I put up. But it's extremely useful, and it's something that you're always going to want to remember you can do. Another cool thing is your bear form, which is overlooked quite a bit. So now I'm going to take you to a different encounter in the Emerald Nightmare on Mythic, which would be Il'gynoth, the eyeball boss. So in that, there are tentacles that spawn, and they debuff random players with this thing called Spew Corruption. Now what Spew Corruption does is every few seconds you're going to spawn a pool of crap on the floor, and it's going to hurt quite a bit, and it's going to silence you if you stand in it. Now, For my guild strategy, if you got Spew Corruption, you run out to the entrance of the fight and you drop your pools as far away from the group as possible. Now on Mythic, you're going to be taking a lot of damage during this. So what I was doing was you hot yourself up, throw a Life Bloom on yourself, Rejuvenation, get yourself a Regrowth hot so you have that triple mastery, and then pop into Bear form. Because when you're in Bear form, you're going to get 200% armor, which is very, very nice for soaking mechanics. So just don't forget about your different shapeshifts and the benefits they provide for you. Cat form is the same way. You move quicker when you're in cat form. If you need to quickly get from one place to another, and let's say Displacer Beast is on cooldown, go into cat form. That 30% movement increase comes a long way for what it does. Also with the cat form, which is very, very cool, is you can stealth. Druids can stealth in all specializations, which is extremely useful. Whether it be avoiding trash that your guild doesn't want to pull, or I know it's hotfix now, but originally you could reset all the trash for between Nifendra and Ursoc, which is really handy. Stealth overall is just a very useful utility spell to have as a player, and try not to forget that you have access to that. Okay, so now we're going to go over a couple macros that I use. First one being, I went over it just a little bit ago when I was talking about the artifact ability, which is Essence of Gahanir. And what it is if you are a troll, you're going to have a racial, which I'm going to open up right here for you. You have a racial ability called Berserking. It's going to give you a 15% haste increase for 10 seconds. Now, it's all up to you. Make sure you are using this in fights. Don't forget that you have this. You should be using this when you need to. But for me personally, I have macroed it together with my artifact ability. So it pops both my Essence of Gahanir and my Berserking at the same time. The other one I wanted to go over is the Innervate macro. When you are a Restoration Druid, if you happen to be, let's say, I am targeting this guy because I want to heal him, and I am really low on mana and I need to get that Innervate out, but I don't want to fumble on my keyboard with hitting escape or tabbing or whatever it be to get rid of my target. It's really useful to make this little macro right here, which is a clear target cast Innervate. And all it does is one button, you're going to clear your target, you're going to be on yourself, and you're going to cast Innervate. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm just going to be targeting this training dummy. I'm going to hit my Innervate macro button. I lost the target and I innervated myself. That is extremely useful because it saves you an entire different button to like reach and touch and do the clicky thing. Lastly, for macros, they are called Mouseovers. Now, I don't know if you noticed it while I was earlier doing... I don't know if you noticed it earlier in the guide, but when I was healing these guys, you notice I don't target him when I heal him. It's just, I don't think you can see it on the recording, but my cursor is on him, but I'm not targeting him, which is what a Mouseover macro is. So it's basically going to cast whatever spell you have written at whatever your mouse is on. So I can target this guy, I have him targeted, but I can put my mouse on the one next to him and heal that guy instead. I really like this for raid healing. It doesn't make as big of a difference in 5-mans, and it will kind of hamper your ability to not keyboard turn. I find myself backpedaling and keyboard turning a lot more than I used to, which is not good. But I think the benefits for the Mouseover macros are just too good to pass up. I will put all of the macros that I use in the description below, so you guys can feel free to copy and paste them if you'd like to try them out. Okay, I can't believe it, but I believe I am finished with the guide. This is the first one I've ever made, and I'm extremely proud of it. And I think before I cap it off, I just want to go over, I'm just going to say 3 major points. If I want you to take away 3 things from this guide, this is what it's going to be. And number 1, hands down, is going to be know the fight before you get in it. Know what is coming up. Read through the dungeon journal. Do your research. Know what mechanics do. Because there's no worse feeling than being in a progression raid group and having something happen and you have no idea what's going on. You need to know what is going to come up and when it's going to happen so you can use your best judgment on how to react to it. Number 2, know what all your spells do and how they work together. Practice. Use your spells. Try and come up with clever ways to match them together. Play with different combos. You saw me show you the burst healing setup. Just have a knowledge of your class. Don't waste things. As I said, let your HOTS do the work. Your class is extremely viable and extremely variable depending on what kind of healing you want to do. Just know your class. And 3, ask questions. If you don't understand something or you're struggling, don't be afraid to ask. I know there's a lot of elitists out there, if that's what you want to call them, that aren't willing to help and will make fun of you and ridicule you, but I won't, and I'm sure you have guildies that won't. There are nice people on forums, believe it or not, you can ask there, but if you're not sure about something, ask. And if you're struggling with something, practice. Practice, practice, practice. Putting the work in on your class will show. And even if you're not recognized for making a fight a little bit easier by dispelling this thing at the correct time or pre-healing the group for a large incoming damage, people may not notice that, but you're making their experience a lot better. And people are going to start wanting to take you with them, okay? It's just practice. Know what you can do, know what the mechanics are, and practice. Ask questions if you don't know, all right? I really hope you guys enjoyed the guide. I did my best on it. It took me a really long time to do. This is my first guide, so I do apologize if there are any mistakes in there or things that could have been said better. I do welcome any constructive criticism in the comments below, and I really appreciate you guys taking your time to watch this video. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great day, and go heal some stuff. See you guys later.